Hi guys, and welcome back to Bookhaven with me, Kim. Today I'm going to be doing my top 10 favorite books of all time. So if you're interested, stick around. Welcome back. So I've actually been in a really bad book slump the last week and a half, 2 weeks? I don't know. I had so many goals for this month, and I don't know, when I plan things, when I put pressure on myself to do things, that's when I don't end up doing them, quite possibly. I don't know what it is. I just have not been able to really get into a book fully. So I did watch a video the other night. It was Kesara's top 10 favorite books of all time with Reads with Kesara, and I really love her videos, love her, and the book selection is so good. So you guys should check that out. I'll link it down below. It kind of inspired me to go back to my favorite books, go back to the reasons why I love reading, and just sort of revisit those books. And I'd like to share that with you guys. Now the books aren't in any particular order, except for maybe my number one favorite book will be concrete, my number one favorite book. So here we go. At number 10, I've got The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. Now this is a fantastic fantasy series that has to do with demons and powers, and just has a whole cast of characters that you'll absolutely fall in love with. I discovered this such a long time ago, and it's just one of the fantasy series that I could really get into. And then I was able to meet the author when I was living in Berlin, which was really special. And it's really fast-paced, really enjoyable. If you're looking for a multi-perspective story and it has great world building, demons and magic, this is a good series to check out. So as usual, I'll link all the books I'm talking about down below, and if you want to see a little bit more about what it's about on Goodreads, just click that button in the description and it'll bring you right to it. Then I've got In a Far Country by Linda Holman. This is an author I discovered in my teenage years who I absolutely fell in love with, and it is a heartbreaking novel. But I love Linda Holman's writing. She's a Canadian author, and she writes a lot of stories, a lot of fiction, adult fiction that takes place in India or Pakistan and England, and it's just a really good story. All of her books have really great love stories as well, and this book really introduced me to the Himalayas and is one of the reasons that I ended up traveling to Nepal. I find I get a lot of inspiration from the books I read. They end up really inspiring me to go see the places. So this is a book that I read a long time ago, and I didn't travel to the Himalayas until the last few years, but it was a novel that left a really lasting impression on me. Then I've got a very beat up old book, which comes in at number 8, and that is An Embarrassment of Mangoes by Anne Vanderhoof. I'm not sure, don't quote me on this. I do believe this is another Canadian author. I have so many books on sailing that I sometimes lose track because quite a few of them are Canadian authors. But this is a book that really inspired me to get into sailing, and I love being out in the water. I'll read a little blurb because it's just a fantastic book, and it's winter and we all want to be somewhere. Well, maybe not all of us. I know some of you are die-hard winter fans, but not me. And this will pull you out of the winter drudgery. Anne Vanderhoof and her husband, Steve, won't be on their deathbeds thinking, "I wish I'd given my crazy dream a try." In the mid-1990s, they rented out their house, moved onto a 40-foot sailboat, and set sail for the Caribbean. During the 2-year escapade, they dropped anchor in 16 countries, steered their way through one sun-drenched adventure after another, and discovered that chasing a dream can lead you to paradise. This is a story that just really takes you on an adventure with this couple on their sailboat, and there's really, the woman absolutely loves cooking, so throughout the book she'll have different exotic recipes and easy to make things for being on a sailboat. Let's see if I can find one here. Okay, so there's one here for cuckoo Caribbean polenta. She has 2 recipes on this page, but I don't know if you can see here. She's got all the directions. And I just loved it. This book made me so hungry, but it really just ignited my want for adventure and being out on the water, and it had a pretty big impact on my life as well. I think that will be a reoccurring theme with a lot of the books that are my top 10 favorite. I read them at the right time, in the right mood, and they have either just touched my heart or steered me in a direction that I will forever be grateful for. At number 7, I've got the poetry of Lucy Maud Montgomery. Now, as you might have heard if you watched my previous videos, I really don't like poetry. I have one other collection of poetry and that's it. But this I received when I was really young. I was quite little and I just fell in love with the poetry in it. There's a lot of just very comforting things in it. Poetry that you can connect with no matter who you are, and poetry on nature as well. And this is the famous Canadian author who wrote the Anne of Green Gables series, and her poetry is just fantastic. I won't read some of my favorite poetry, but I'll tell you, if you ever do pick it up and you have a child to read to, In Twilight Land is one of my favorite poems. When I had my son, I used to read that a lot. And The Grumble Family, which is hilarious and has a very good message. So again, that's the poetry of Lucy Maud Montgomery. And I've got The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is an absolutely unforgettable, mind-blowing series that there's only 2 books out so far, and supposedly there's supposed to be a book 3, but nobody knows when it's coming out. It's been long overdue and we're all very excited to see the continuation of this. But it's an excellent fantasy series. World building is absolutely incredible. This is basically about the tale of this hero and through his own words and looking back on his life, and it is just, you won't be able to put it down. I don't know anyone who's read this who hasn't fallen in love with it. And this is another author, one of the very few that I was actually able to meet, and Mr. Rothfuss is such an unbelievably good orator. He is so good at working a crowd and just breaking down his writing. If he ever comes to your city, please go see him. Even if you haven't read the series, just to hear him speak is completely worth it. So again, Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And number 5, I've got a book that I'm sure all of you are expecting to see on this list at some point, and that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Now, this is a series that so many of us on BookTube have fallen in love with, have had since our childhood, or that has gotten us into reading, and this is also the case with this book. I mean, I loved reading before that. I was reading a lot of R.L. Stine and C.S. Lewis, but really it was J.K. Rowling who helped me become the bookworm that I am today and just fall in love with fantasy, whether it be adult fantasy or middle grade or YA. I absolutely love this series and it's very close to my heart. And I'm missing 2 books in the series that I must have lent out. So family, friends, you know who you are. If you have it, get my babies home. Next, at number 4, I have got Running the Amazon by Kane. Now, this is a book that is very, very special to me in so many ways. I got this out in my high school library when I was in grade 9. When I was maybe 14, I don't know. It is a story about Joe, and he leads an expedition that starts in Peru, and he travels the entirety of the Amazon River all the way out to the ocean. It is a book that I have not reread since, and I'd be very curious to read. After I read this book, I was just obsessed with the Amazon, and I wanted to learn everything about it, the flora and fauna, about the indigenous tribes, about the countries it was in. Soon after reading this, I heard an announcement on the PA looking for people to register to be Rotary Exchange students. So I applied and went through the process, not thinking much of it, that I would get very far. Until I did. I was in the very last part and I had to get my parents to come to an interview with the Rotary Club. And so I told them, I said, Mom, Dad, I'm really sorry, but I applied to go on a Rotary Exchange. Will you support me? Will you come and talk? And I ended up being accepted and sent to live in Brazil for a year. And it was probably one of the biggest and best decisions I ever made in my entire life. And in part, quite a large part, it was due to this book. So not only is it a fantastic story, a mind-boggling adventure, I could never have done what this man did, but it was just a really big part of my life and the direction it took. Now we're getting down to the top 3 books, and they pretty much are concrete my top 3 books of all time. Surprise, surprise, 2 of them are fantasy, but the number 1 is not. so that might be surprising to a few of you. At number 3, I have Agatha H. and the Clockwork Princess by Phil and Kaja Foglio. This was my introduction to steampunk, which is so much fun. Now I like to do cosplay at different festivals, and this is basically about Agatha H., who is a woman who's been hiding in plain sight from the bad guys, let's say. And I don't want to spoil too much because it's such a good series. There is a graphic novel called The Girl Genius, but I love the book even more. I'll just show you though. I do have, I think, volume number 1 of the graphic novels. The art style is really fun. And steampunk is really fun, so you can definitely check it out. I always like imagining the characters in my mind and how I see them and how I hear them. I would highly recommend checking this out if you like a strong female character, if you like fantasy and steampunk, or if you have not yet discovered steampunk. Agatha H. series, there's 3 novels and quite a collection of graphic novels. Definitely check it out if you need to try something new. At number 2, I have something I read in the last year, and that is Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. Did I have that right? Yes, Jessica Townsend. And this is a book I've talked about a couple times on my channel, and I know many of you have read. It is a fantasy, a middle grade fantasy that is just so whimsical and is so much fun. It has werecats and so much magic, a magic school or society. Something if you're looking to get out of your mind, get out of your brain, just explore your imagination. This is a series you're definitely going to want to check out. Now, number 1, my number 1 favorite book of all time is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. This is a very hefty book, if you can see. I don't know, it's probably one of the bigger ones I've read. It is based on his life and true events that happened in his life. I want to give you a little bit about the author, and in turn that will tell you a little bit about this story. Gregory David Roberts was born in Melbourne, Australia, and he was sentenced to prison for 19 years for a series of armed robberies. He ended up escaping and spending 10 of those years living in Bombay, India, living in the slums and kind of working his way through all the bad choices he had made in his life and creating quite a community around him. He did a lot of good things, and then he got involved in some questionable things. I think he established a free medical clinic in the slums, and along the way he ends up finding himself becoming a street soldier for the mafia in Bombay, and he meets some very powerful and very interesting, enigmatic characters. There's a lot of violence in this book. There's a lot of exotic backdrops to the stories. There's a lot of hope and love and heart in this as well. And some of the writing is just like poetry. I don't really like reading books on philosophy, but the way this man thinks is just so beautiful and poetic, and there is a lot of philosophy that comes through some of the characters that just makes you think and appreciative and contemplative, which at the time in my life when I discovered this book was perfect for me. If you're looking for an adventure, if you're looking for something thought-provoking, I would definitely give this a look. Again, that's Shantaram by David Gregory Roberts. Thanks again for joining me for my top 10 favorite books of all time. If you have any advice for how you get out of a reading slump, let me know. I will be all ears. And until next time, keep reading. Bye for now.